Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Three Keys to an Effective Mobile Strategy. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Eric Carlson. I'm one of the partners and co-founders of Propelics. We have a great turnout for today's session on building effective mobile strategies. This is a very exciting topic for us and something that's very topical here in late 2015. From our perspective, 2015 has been a bit of the year of the mobile hump, where we see a lot of talk in the industry around the technology side of strong enterprise mobile strategies, such as MDM and security and identity management and things like that. And sometimes we see that maybe dominate the conversation a little bit more than some of the, from our perspective, more productive sides of the conversation related to use case identification and really changing the business through mobile. So Glenn today is going to walk through a bit and some strategies in terms of how to maybe change some of that. It's nice to see some of our clients on the call today. So hello to Russ and Scott and to Joe. It's great to see you. And I also wanted to welcome our speaker, Glenn Gruber. Glenn, nice to have you today.
Thanks, Eric.
A couple things just before we get started. Number one, in terms of asking questions and those types of things, please use the QA panel on the GoToWebinar control panel. Just ask a question. I'm going to pull those together, and either I'll try to answer them in line or I'll save them to the end. We can have a little Q&A with Glenn at the end of this webinar. And like all of our webinars, the recording will be available for this webinar, as well as the slides will be made available to you. Those are always available on our website at www.propelics.com/resources. And so those will always be available. Glenn, go to the next slide. Just a few seconds around us. Propelics creates mobile strategies and world-class applications for the enterprise. 100% of our focus in what we do is built around mobile within the enterprise, specifically how we can use not only good customer-facing use cases, but also on some of the more higher value use cases that we feel are built around employees and partners. We have a 20-year track record in providing enterprise-level strategy and delivery services to Fortune 500 clients. We've been helping build strategies around technology use, but even more so when it comes to kind of leveraging some disruptive technologies like mobile and beacons and other types of things similar to that. For the last 8 years, we've been working really exclusively within mobile, both in terms of some of the more core embedded use devices back in the old days around Windows Mobile and those types of things, but even more so obviously now as we've been riding kind of the consumer mobile device wave into the enterprise. In all these types of things, we've been trying to drive valuable use cases to employees and customers and partners for our clients. We're based in San Jose, but we also have offices in Boston and Pittsburgh and consultants across North America. And we also have a development center that's based in Guadalajara, Mexico. We focus on clients that are based in North America, but a lot of our engagements due to our client sizes include very much of a global reach. And Glenn, if you go to the next one, you guys can take a look at and see some of our clients that we work with. We really work with across industries with good focuses in areas that have had a strong proficiency towards mobile, such as retail, manufacturing, services, financial services, and things like that. On the next slide, just briefly in terms of what we do for our clients, we really have 4 major category of services. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is really based off some of the work that we do within enterprise mobile strategy. And so we have a series of kickstarts that we've developed that really help clients out at different stages within their enterprise mobile lifecycle. A lot of times starting with things such as an enterprise mobile roadmap, which some of the Glenn's strategies and things are kind of touch on today, as well as IT strategy for mobile and helping IT teams build plans in terms of what spend we should have now and over time to be able to support some of those enterprise mobile use cases. And then for other businesses who are working against the strategy, we do a lot with app scoping and prototype creation to help validate good mobile use case ideas, a lot in UI UX design. And then for some of our clients that are a little bit farther along, we do a lot of work within mobile center of excellence creation, or a mobile competency center, if you will, and a lot of work within testing strategy for mobile. Another area that has grown a lot within our business is app development and support. We do a lot of in-house implementation services for our clients that come of our strategy work, and a lot of managed services as well, where we focus really heavily on UX and application simplicity up front, and we try to build quality, reusable, portable code from a web services perspective to support those applications. The third area is the Mobile Research Council. The Mobile Research Council, we started the MRC, as we call it, to fill a few gaps we saw with some of our clients. First, we wanted really better access to mobile-first analyst viewpoints, and as well as what was kind of going on within the industry, and trying to distill the signal from the noise down from some of our clients. And so we joined with Maribel Lopez from Lopez Research to build much more of an interactive discussion forum. These webinars that you're on today are very much one way. You guys are really consumers of that. The MRC is much more collaborative, where we not only share industry information and talk about that as a group, but we also have clients who come in and share their implementation strategies and some of their enterprise mobile strategies, and have other customers of the MRC comment on those, what's worked for them, kind of things and risks to be able to watch out for and things like that. We also collaborate a lot on use cases and what's been working, as well as some technology decisions on the IT side, in terms of what vendors are delivering or not. And the last area is our products. Glenn, if you go to the next one, as we've started helping our clients out over the last few years in delivering enterprise mobile roadmaps and solutions, we started to see some repeatable types of use cases coming up more and more that our clients were building. And so we've kind of taken those on and starting to productize those for some of our clients. And so we have 3 right now. On the left, we have a very large enterprise-focused enterprise conference room mapping tool, and really a meeting finder type of idea called Exact Meeting. It's gorgeous UI. We do a lot with integrating with Microsoft Exchange to show room availability, finding meetings. It's one of those use cases where our clients always saw every meeting starting 10 or 15 minutes late. You take that 10 or 15 minutes and multiply by every single meeting by every single employee, and you get a significantly large ROI number in terms of reducing the amount of time even spent in meetings. And so it's an application that we've been building out. It's at exactmeeting.com. Same thing with SureAudit. SureAudit is an enterprise auditing tool built around employee audits or retail-based audits or manufacturing. It's extremely flexible with some integrated task management and reporting, and trying to use that as a way to allow our clients to focus on more valuable use cases. And we also have a lead to capture, which is a marketing-based tool for capturing leads out on shows and things like that, that has also been very successful for us. All 3 of these are cloud-based services that we've found that our clients have been repeatedly billing, and we thought it'd be better for us to be able to build those out as services for them, and for them internally to go after far more valuable and poignant use cases, which is kind of the point of this webinar. So based on that, let me introduce our speaker, Glenn Gruber. So Glenn is a senior mobile strategist within Propelics. He's been advising travel technology firms and other enterprises on how to leverage mobile within their businesses for over 6 or 7 years. He's responsible for evangelizing mobility and helping clients approach mobility solutions strategically, thinking beyond really the app, and leads the delivery of Propelics mobile strategy engagements for our client organizations. He's also a leading voice in the travel sector as a T-News node, where he writes about how mobile and other emerging technologies are impacting the travel sector. He's also been a judge at i4Travel's Mobile Innovation and Travel Awards for a whole bunch of years. So Glenn, thanks for coming here today, and let me turn over the controls to you.
Okay, thanks, Eric, and thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully, you'll get some good information out of this, maybe some good advice, and we'll get some good questions at the end as well. So before we kind of get into the title of this, the 3 keys to an effective mobile strategy, I thought we'd take a little bit of time to set some context for today's discussion. So want to kind of start with talking about the state of mobile within the enterprise, and I thought that this was a good graph from Vision Mobile from one of their recent reports. Just kind of looking at where do mobile developers come from, and you see here that enterprise IT is only 8% of all mobile developers. Now, 8% isn't a lot, and I'll also say that a lot of these types of surveys, it's not the exact number that's important. It's really more of a directional thing. And whether 8% is the right number, should it be 15 or 25 or some other number, I don't know, and I don't even know that it matters. But what it does indicate to me is that most of the people who are really engaged in mobile development are not doing it within the enterprise. Although we know that there's a ton of opportunity for the use of mobile within the enterprise, both with customers as well as with employees and partners, as Eric has talked about. So again, it's an indicator to us that there's a lot more to be done here. And it could be indicative of the fact that a lot of the top mobile developers are working with companies that are doing some more sexy stuff, at the cutting edge, and a lot of that is consumer facing, where the enterprise use of mobile lags a little bit behind the consumer oriented things. So, but hopefully, as we start to get a little bit more mobile first in our posture within the enterprise, that will make corporate IT and mobile within the enterprise more appealing for them, and that number will start to grow. So, but we're not there yet. So let's just kind of keep going forward. So something else I also wanted to talk about is that there's a lot that we can learn from what's going on the consumer side. So there's a ton of stats that we can look at. We know that there's more than 250 million apps on the consumer side between iOS and Android, $20 billion in app sales. So we know that obviously it's a big thing. And there's also plenty of other stats that we can look at, like this one from Andreessen Horowitz, that shows that mobile is really taking up a greater and greater part of engagement with users, and the quarterly shipments are many factors higher than it is for desktops today. So kind of mobile's eating the world, as they say. And something else that I think is important about mobile, Benedict Evans, who is an analyst for Andreessen Horowitz and someone that you should be reading if you're not already, has kind of said that the first rule of computing is to never ask a user a question that the computer should be able to reason out by itself. So, with all the sensors that we have, with all the on the device, the intelligence in the cloud, we have a tremendous opportunity to kind of reconfigure the business processes, and whether it be intelligent reminding users of important information when they need it, that's kind of the new goal. And we saw this at WWDC from Apple, where they talked about the Siri proactive assistant, as well as at Google I/O with Google Now on Tap this summer. That building context-sensitive apps is really going to be the new target for computing, and really shows highlights where the intelligence that we can have on the mobile device can be very impactful. On its face, it's kind of motherhood and apple pie, but it's also not easy to do, and it requires a lot of maturity on the organization side to try and take on those types of apps. So for now, I would say within corporate IT that this is still largely aspirational, but it is the direction that we should all start to be thinking. So where is enterprise IT when it comes to unlocking innovation with mobile? So at Propelics, we have this graph here, which we kind of call the law of three. We break up innovation into kind of three main sectors. One is when a couple of years ago we just first started getting mobile devices, and there was a lot of excitement, but not a lot of activity. Kind of the next stage gets us more into taking the tools and information and systems that we have, and now just extending that to delivering it on a mobile device. So you can get a little bit of process innovation, but it's still not kind of groundbreaking kind of work. And then finally, what you get into this game changers, where you're not just changing business processes, but sometimes you have the ability to create either new capabilities for your customers or for your employees that were not possible because you weren't able to interact on a mobile device. And so, but right now, as you can kind of see by the we are here, we haven't gotten too much further than just the email, contacts, and calendar, and we'll have some other stats to kind of underscore that fact in a moment. So we still have a long way to go, and why might that be? Sometimes it's the traditional IT funding mechanisms that we have don't uncover those really big ideas or have us take a lot of risk. It's a lot of times we just focus more on extending what we have, delivering information from systems, onto a new device, rather than creating these big ideas from whole cloth. And why is that? sometimes it's because with the mature technologies, the IT people teams, they already know the roles and responsibilities of the business teams that they're working with, and they've got a very good sense of how to leverage the technologies that they're comfortable with to identify and build these solutions. With mobile, we're still very, very early when you think about it, and the line of sight to those solutions is not quite as clear. So, mobile is a lot more about, the state of the art of we're in the stage of, the art of the possible. And so it's a little bit of transition for many companies. I just wanted to also point out here a study from IBM that looks at how much productivity have we, incremental productivity have we delivered by putting mobile in the hands of our employees, and where do we see that going? And as you can see, really has not been that much yet. We hope that it's going to be a lot more as we go forward. And even though this study is a couple of years old almost, just in talking with analysts, talking with our clients and others in the industry, these numbers haven't really moved significantly over time. So let's talk a little bit about why we haven't gotten any further. Now, it's interesting to me that when you talk to people about mobile, you hear people say things like, mobile is going to change everything. The opportunities with mobile are almost limitless, and so on. But so the conventional wisdom would be that there's no shortage of ideas for enterprise apps, only priorities. But in reality, we're finding, so if anything, ideas would not be a constraint to building a mobile strategy. The reality is kind of quite the opposite. A lot of technology teams and business relationship managers, or whatever title you use in your company, who deal with the business, have a tough time of drawing out these great new ideas. So that doesn't take us quite where we need to be. And I wanted to share with you, this is a slide that we often use when we talk to our clients about, what are the elements of building a mobile strategy. And like Eric said earlier, a lot of the conversation happens at the bottom of this chart, where we talk about the technology considerations. We talk about, what MDM, or mobile application management platform should we be using? How are we going to handle, services, and what should our architecture be? But we're still not really well connected to the needs of the business. So having that business alignment is critical for a good mobile strategy, perhaps more important with mobile than any other aspect of IT and technology today. So we need to kind of make sure that before we start making all these technology buying decisions and start picking up tools and platforms and so on, that we know what it is that we want to build, so that when we go spend all that money, we know that what we've acquired will actually support the use cases and business cases that we want to bring to life. But that's not often what we actually really do, in life. In a large part, IT says, well, I know I'm going to need these big buckets. I'm going to need MDM. I'm going to need security. I'm going to need a development platform. And so we go off and we buy these pieces that we think that we're going to need first, so that we're kind of be ready when that demand comes. But that when demand comes doesn't always show up. And now I also want to be clear that for the most part, all these pieces that we've bought, they're good pieces. They're really good pieces. They score very well on the Magic Quadrants. They meet all the criteria that you've set up. But from building a mobile strategy, does that really mean that we're ready? Is our strategy complete? And the answer is, kind of no, because we don't know whether or not those really great pieces of software that were acquired, do they meet the needs of the business? Does it all kind of knit together, especially when you take these individual components, when you try and knit them together to see, does this deliver everything that the business requires? It may not be there, and that's kind of where we put the cart before the proverbial horse many times. And also, since we haven't really started the strategy with understanding the needs of the business. Um, what do we do with all that stuff that we bought? We want to start to build and deploy apps and make it look like we're getting good leverage out of and good ROI out of those tools. But mostly what we end up doing is kind of paving the goat road. I don't know if you know what that phrase means. I kind of picked it up recently. I thought it's a good one. It's basically, the goat walks up and down the same path, and instead of all we're doing is following, we're paving over that road. So we're just following and kind of rebuilding on it for a small screen, the things that we've already built for the larger desktop screens. And that's all good to bring that basic functionality, but it doesn't really take advantage of the possibilities that mobile provides us, both, again, just based on the contextual information that you can have when someone's doing doing their job. So we still have a long way to go here. And kind of for proof for that we're paving the goat's road is this stat that came from Good Technology's Mobility Index report earlier this year. It looks at the top 5 app categories across the different devices that are served by their platform. And if you look at them, the 1, 2, 4, and 5, I mean 3 and 5 are the goat road stuff. It's secure browsing, secure IM, document access. Custom apps is a much smaller part of this. And so I look at this and I say, is this the best that we can do? With all these great things that we talk about that we can do with mobile, are we really going as fast or as far as we ought to? And, I think that it's kind of a self-evident rhetorical question that, this is not a transformational use of mobile. We're not getting where we need to go. But in any case, you would think that, yes, now that we have this technology and we're deploying apps, let's look at not just the type of apps that we're doing, but let's look at the number of apps that we're deploying. Are we doing a good job of leveraging the technology? And this is another slide from the Good report that just came out, and 2/3 of enterprises are deploying less than 5 apps. It's actually between 2 and 5 apps to their employees. That's really small. Only 5% are doing more than 10. Now, it's not to say that there aren't companies out there who have developed dozens, in some case, into the triple digits of apps for their employees and are really, taking a forward view of mobile and putting it to real use. That is happening, and those are often held out in articles and by analysts as these case studies, these beacons of light of what can happen. But the truth is that they are the very, very rare exception. So if you look at how few apps are really being deployed to the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees out there in the companies that we work with, there's very, very much more to go. And the kind of without that focus on the use case, that's why we don't have these great ideas. That's why we're paving the goat's road and not deploying very much. So, a lot of times you see companies, analyst firms come up with these top 10 predictions for the year, and there's there's very good information here, but I wanted to focus on kind of 4 of these 10 that I thought were important to highlight. So one is that IT organizations are going to dedicate 25% of their software budget to mobile by 2017. So that means that that number is a lot lower today. And if we're always thinking in this mobile first word, then we're really not putting our money with where our mouth is. We see issues like linking mobile to databases and other legacy systems is causing almost half of app initiatives to either be delayed or go over budget or really not get off the ground at all. Only 35% of large enterprises will hopefully, because this was done at the beginning of the year, hopefully have deployed mobile application development platform by 2015. So that leaves 2/3 of companies that are not really well positioned to do much of anything with mobile. And then governance, particularly around security, is very, very low in the maturity curve here. So I just, to kind of level set where we stand, I thought that these were 4 pretty important numbers. Even if these come true, that show that we still have a long way to go. So given all this data, given that for the last few years, everyone's been saying that this is going to be the year of mobile in 2012 and 13 and 14 and 15, we should kind of ask ourselves an important question. Have we been doing this wrong all this time, in terms of trying to build up capability for mobile? Are we approaching it the wrong way around? IT is often used to building capacity and repeatability for these well understood technologies that we've been using for a number of years and plan to be using for many more years even going forward. But that's pretty much the anti-definition of mobile. Everything changes really quick. It's all very emerging. So we can't, so we need to start thinking about, is that the right path? So as opposed to trying to make sure that we're building a capability that matches the business demand. And because we're not doing that as a group, that's where you're seeing that many individual departments, especially the marketing departments, but otherwise in lines of business, are starting to contract with third-party vendors for mobile without asking for permission. This happened with the cloud and still happens with the cloud. It's happening with mobile as well. And I'm sure it's an issue that you're all acutely aware of within your own organization. And if you're not, I can almost guarantee that this is happening. So it's something to be on the lookout for. So when we, after all the things that we've done, are we being honest when we reflect on our readiness for mobile with where we are? Have we done all that we need to do in terms of, preparing, and do we know everything that we need to know, to really execute going forward? And perhaps not. And it's important to understand that mobile impacts, all areas of the company. It's introduced a wide range of new initiatives to enterprise IT, and mobility challenges in almost every area, the entrenched traditional IT thinking. So we need to be a little bit more creative in how we're going to bring things going forward, and probably require some new approaches to development across some new operating systems, security architectures, and the kind of rules that we set for how we implement security through the organization needs to be viewed through kind of a mobile lens. And then the architectures that we've had and may not work for us going forward. And the fact that all of these elements, which are often owned by different groups within the IT organization, need to come together in order to make mobile work within the organization. So a few more stats before we get into the 3 keys, but I think that they're important, but I'm not going to take a lot of time with them. One, if we're going to start to look at how ready are we, it's important to start evaluating honestly your mobile maturity. And so here's a stat from a recent Accelerator report, and I like these kinds of perception differential surveys. I think that they're very, very instructive because they often show the gaps that exist in getting to a common understanding, and if you can't do that, it's really hard to move forward. And so unsurprisingly, IT decision makers feel that they're far more mature from a mobile perspective than the developers who are doing the kind of on-the-ground blocking and tackling work, and who are probably experimenting with the new languages and have side projects on their own, much more so than the management is. And so I think that it may be a more pessimistic, but probably a more realistic view of where things really stand. And unfortunately, there's not a parallel version of this that looks at the business perception of mobile maturity as well. But I would hazard a guess that it's going to look a lot more like the developer view, and perhaps even a little bit more pessimistic. Because again, what the business is using as a reference point is not the other IT systems that we have within the enterprise, or what apps we've deployed and developed within the enterprise, but they're looking at what they're downloading in their personal life, off of the App Store, and the experiences that they have, that are being provided by different companies are, some of them are really quite fantastic, and it's hard to match those expectations, but it's also important to understand that that's kind of what you're being measured against in today's day and age. Another couple of quick ones here. This comes from a Cognizant survey back in the spring, just kind of underscoring that your ability to move forward is significantly limited by the legacy systems or legacy architectures that you have. So this is a big obstacle. And from the same survey, also showing that over half the respondents believe that 60% or more of their IT systems are not optimized to support real-time mobility. And again, if real-time mobility and information and contextually sensitive applications are the goal, then the fact that the majority of your systems are not ready to support that is a big consideration, a big factor to being able to kind of deliver the experiences that you'd like to. And governance is another area that I think really lags behind in maturity. This is an IBM survey that I referenced. And if you take a look at this, these are different elements on oversight or governance, and do we have a well-defined strategy? How well aligned is it? On the face of it, looking at 40 to 50% numbers doesn't sound so bad. But also you have to remember that this is what they say a top 2 box score. So this is either agree or strongly agree. And in every time that you break down the details, I've not seen this specific information, but for almost every other survey, you're going to find that the strongly agree is really in that 10 to 15% range rather than 40 to 50, which paints a very, very different picture. But again, a lot of times I try and look at these kinds of data that we've presented so far as directional, because none of it is specific to your business. But in any case, this points to an area that requires a lot of focus. So if you're going to start to make concrete plans on how are you going to move the ball forward, it's important to have an objective view of where your organization stands from a mobile maturity perspective. And to help clients get a better sense for where they stand, we've developed what we call the Propelics Mobile Maturity Index, which we evaluate the company's mobile maturity across several key attributes. There's 8 or 10 of them. And the value of the index of something like this is not just looking at the raw scores. The raw scores matter, but they're not most important. But it's also getting, because we've got this from a number of different companies in different industries, it gives you an idea, not just what your raw score is, but where do you stand in comparison, which is also important to understand. And it's also important to recognize that within any of the elements of this index, you don't have to be at a 5 to say that you're successful. You have to, it's more important to understand what's the minimum that I need to be at in order to get started and move the ball forward. This is mobile is a journey and we're at the very beginning of it. So it's most important to get out there, build momentum, get to that minimum so that you can get started, and then keep building and understand what those gaps are so that you can start to make some changes and close those gaps. So when I first started putting this webinar together, I was thinking a little bit more tactically, and I realized that this is, so this was one of the first slides that I put together, but then I realized that this is not the right slide. This is a slide that probably many expected to see because this is the stuff that I know individually I can go do. But it's, again, that one level further down in the weeds that will get you into that cart before the horse situation. These are all still individual team activities, but it doesn't mean that if you do all of these, and these are things that IT can really do on their own, it doesn't mean that we're building to the needs of the business. It doesn't mean that we're able to coordinate all the different groups who have to come together to make mobile really happen. Maybe you've done, but there are things that need to get done, and maybe you've done some of them, maybe you've done none of them, but it's important to take a step back. And this is where we get kind of to the 3 keys to developing a holistic strategy. So, and if you can start to focus on these 3, I think that you're going to be well on your way. And quickly, like one, establish a process to identify and prioritize the projects that you want to build. Like, what are the use cases? Make sure that there's alignment between the IT capabilities and what the business requires, and then establish some effective governance to stay on track. So let's talk about this, these 3 in a little bit more detail. So like we said at much earlier, you think that coming up with these ideas are not the problem, but the truth is that getting those ideas out of the organization and figuring out which ones to attack first is really a big problem. And one thing that I think that you want to stop by that ideation and prioritization really can help with is that you want to stop actioning different ideas that are brought based solely on first in, first out, or based on, there's a VP or SVP that comes to you with a project and that therefore gets prioritized. Or worse yet, you've got someone who kind of channels their inner Nikita Khrushchev and just kind of bangs their shoe on the table until they get, you start building what they want, just so that they stop bothering you. That's the wrong way to try and put together priority. You have really, your mobile development resources are going to be very scarce earlier on in the journey, and you don't want to have them working on things that are not impactful. So how do you get the business to start to think about what their needs are from a mobile perspective? Are your teams ready to facilitate these types of discussions? So there are many different ways to elicit the needs from the business stakeholders. And it is important to do it with all the different groups in the company, because you want to be able to look at not just the squeaky wheel, but there may be important opportunities in one part of the business that are more important than another. And again, you want to stack rank all of those. So we have one method that we use, and this is where you see these different stickies, and it's very much like creating user stories. If you're familiar with Agile, where people kind of talk about what capabilities do they want, and they talk about it's aligned to what's the business value of doing that, and then who is the role, what's the actor who's affected by having this capability. And you very quickly start to see where the good ideas come from visually. And so this is really valuable, but this doesn't have to be the only path that you take to trying to get these ideas out of the organization. Just find one that works for you and for your company and use it. Go from business unit to business unit and collect all of those ideas. And then once you do that, you can start to evaluate these different ideas against each other, and figure out what attributes matter. At Propelics, when we do this with our clients, we look at a couple of different categories. We look at what's the business value, how much does this impact our financial and organizational objectives, what's the organizational readiness of the company, primarily from a business process perspective. Is this a process that doesn't exist, or is it one that we've got a very good handle on? We look at technical complexity and then also data risk. And once you start scoring these ideas individually, you can now start to see, well, which are the good ones? Well, we're starting to build a prioritization of which ones you want to action first. And then the next step is to start to look for patterns. Where can you start grouping together ideas that are related to each other that might make a module within an application? And then further from there, let's look at where do these modules start to fit together into an actual app idea. And then now you can have a list of app at an app level, scored across the entire organization and also within the different business units that you can use to start to build against. Because you'll know which ones are the most actionable, which ones have the most value, and that's where you put your resources against. And then you avoid that kind of Khrushchev-like priority methodology, which almost never serves the company well. Now, remember, so that's one way of looking at prioritization and ideation. Now, remember what we said earlier, that a good mobile strategy has to make sure that the business needs and the technology needs are aligned. So now that we have a good idea of what we need to build and support, let's start to look at what technology, infrastructure, and development processes we need in place to achieve those goals. So, this is where at Propelics we do what we call an IT readiness assessment for mobile. Analyzing, again, we've got about a dozen categories here, what the mobile maturity of an IT organization is. And it's important to note that, and this is what we use in the Mobile Maturity Index, it's important to note that this is not an evaluation of the basic skills and capabilities of your IT organization. This is how ready are they to take on mobile development. Teams may be excellent at supporting web or legacy or desktop applications that are the foundation of your business, but that doesn't mean that that same team in its current configuration is then ready to just start to do mobile or understand what's important when you're taking on mobile applications. So a good example of that is you may have a great QA and testing team, and they're fantastic at keeping your big enterprise applications up, but it doesn't mean that they're ready to take on mobile testing, which has a lot of unique challenges, like understanding how are you going to test against a highly fragmented device population, and also understand what are the, for them, brand new non-functional requirements that are specific to mobile, like carrier testing and the like. So there's a lot to look at here and to analyze to see what you're doing well, and also to identify those gaps. And once you start to identify those gaps, now you can figure out, very discreetly, what are the different activities, and gets back to that list of 6, before, that you have to do to close those gaps. And now, if you prioritize that, and we only ever tell people, don't look at more than a 12 to 18-month window of what you can accomplish, because 18 months from now, we don't know what iOS 11 is going to look like, or the Android P is going to be, whatever that might stand for. Things may be very different then, so don't create these long-term plans. Focus on getting some important stuff done really fast. And a lot of times when we put these kinds of technology strategy roadmaps together for our clients, they use these as punch lists. They go up on the walls and people start Xing things out. And it's a good way to focus the organization of what needs to get done, especially since all of these different activities need to be done in concert and across many different teams, which may not be, the mobile team per se. And that kind of leads me to governance. As we discussed earlier, mobile ends up cutting across many different siloed parts of the organization. But the execution of a mobile strategy requires a strong interreliance on many teams not to just do that, to do their part. And it's important that what they're working on and the directions that they're taking make sense in the context of the overall strategy and what the other groups are doing. So, we talked about the numerous elements of the IT readiness roadmap, which fall on different teams to complete. So orchestrating all of these activities is critical, and it requires a pretty strong governance structure to have in place. And not unlike the interrelated gravitational forces that keep the planets in their orbits. Earth's orbit's not just impacted by our velocity and how far we are from the sun, but also gravity from Jupiter and even little Pluto. So if any of those things changed materially, our orbit would be impacted catastrophically, perhaps. So similarly, the role of the mobile governance body is to make sure that all these activities are kept in balance, particularly as they change over time and our strategies evolve as our maturity improves. So just to illustrate a point, this is a structure that we've talked about with different clients that gives an idea of how many different moving parts there can be, and the fact, and maybe most importantly, that not all of them need to sit within a mobile center of excellence if that's the direction that you choose to go to try and bring all of your mobile activities together. It's important that you should not feel that you need to recreate all of these different groups that are in the gray to the right, because a lot of those teams are working. There's no point in creating shadow mobile versions just to do it. Just make sure that all of those groups are brought in and included and bought in to the direction that as a company you're going to take with mobile, and they know where they need to contribute. And I also want to clarify that MCOEs or mobile competency centers, whatever you choose to call them, they can be very valuable, but they're not necessary to succeed with mobile. In some organizations, MCOEs work great. In others, they don't work at all. So it's not useful to try and force fit them into an organization where MCOEs don't work, or COEs in general, I should say, don't work. But you have to look for some way of organizing and coordinating across all these different teams if it's not through a center of excellence of a sort. And also understand that MCOEs take different shapes. For some companies, it works for it to be a knowledge repository. For some, expert advisors, and others, the blocking and tackling of building mobile apps. In other groups, it's a combination of all three or two of the three. So you have to really think of what's right, for your company. This can be very, useful, but as they say, your mileage may vary. And then lastly, at the bottom here, we talk about having a mobile governance council, and this is kind of the executive sponsorship and executive stakeholders that are overseeing everything. This is as important as any of the other individual roles. Mobile strategy is not created once. It continues to evolve all the time. The mobile ecosystem is evolving all the time, and so you have to adjust to that and also adjust to the business needs. So governance and executive sponsorship can be really important to keep it evergreen, to keep it going, and to keep people focused on task. When you think about it, that improving mobile testing is not just the QA team's responsibility. Preparing the help desk is not just the help desk responsibility. You need support, oversight, and coordination with all the other teams if you're going to make your mobile vision come alive. So, by having governance, really important to keeping your mobile strategy dynamic and making sure that everyone stays together. And a few things to think about here is, what is the role of that committee? What can it do, and maybe more importantly, what can it do? Is this an information sharing mechanism, or can you have decision power? But this group should also establish kind of the rules of engagement, rules of responsibility, create the RACI across the teams so that when a decision needs to be made, you're not kind of relitigating whose call it is every single time and what role each group has across this topic or that. So, pretty important. And then, just some advice on a strategy for the governance council. Make sure that you're meeting at least monthly, at least at the beginning, so that you got a good cadence and the amount of communication is strong. At that first meeting, focus on a charter for the organization. And this should be a really strong nexus for information sharing. Everyone should be coming prepared to these meetings and talking about what's going on in the projects that kind of fall under their scope of responsibility, jointly discussing future projects. And sometimes it's valuable to bring in guest speakers from the outside or outside vendors to make presentations for improving everyone's level of knowledge. But most importantly, this is also can be important as a mechanism for decision making. So as mobile projects come up, or you're thinking about device strategy, this is a key place where some of these decisions should be made. And when if you go through that analysis and you build up your roadmap of what you need to do from a technology perspective, this is where those final decisions and agreeing upon what's going to happen should occur. So I know that we've only got a few minutes, about 6 or 7 minutes left. Go back. I think that, if you focus on these 3 bigger areas of identifying and prioritizing what the business requires, making sure that the IT and technology teams are able to support those requirements, and then having really strong governance to make sure that the organization stays on track and continues to work in concert, I think you'll have a really good chance for success. And all through this process, you'll be getting to those detailed decisions, but make sure that you've got a good framework for looking at this before you get started. So with that, Eric, let me turn it back to you, and let's see if we have any questions to take.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Glenn. We do have a few questions. And we have a little bit more time, so if folks want to drop a couple other questions in the Q&A panel within GoTo, feel free to do so. But Glenn, I have one for you here. One is that Tim asks, should the consumer app roadmap be tied to an employee app roadmap? And should the tools be the same? Should this be the same implementation team? What have you seen there?
Well, not to have the consultant speak to say that it depends, but it does. There's a couple of things to think about. There are certain elements that if you can have them aligned, it's just going to provide you a little bit more. I don't know if economies of scale is the right phrase, but as you're building up the skills within the team, they'll be more interchangeable between whether you're working on a consumer-facing application or an employee-facing application. But sometimes what we do see is that a big part of what and sometimes this comes down to the native versus MADP, like an accelerator or a Xamarin kind of approach. It comes down to how much control do you require of the device, and are there certain things that can really only be done via native controls, or can be done using the APIs built into those MADP platforms. And oftentimes it's the consumer-facing applications that are going to push those boundaries a little bit harder than the others. So I would not hold back, because revenue is usually pretty important. I would not hold back the capabilities of your consumer team simply because for a lot of the internal things you feel that an accelerator or Xamarin will serve you just fine. So it could turn out that you could use the same team or it could not. It really, again, you have to, this gets back to understanding what the objective of what it is that we want to build, and then making the right technology selection for how am I going to go about building it, and making sure that your teams have the right skills to deploy those tools. So yeah, if you have a lot of consistency between the consumer objectives and the employee objectives, you could probably get by with choosing one direction from a technology standpoint. If they're very different, it may not work out so well.
Can you go to the next slide real quick? Just before our next question, just want to remind everyone that what Glenn talked about here today related to some of the enterprise mobile app roadmap creation, some of the work in terms of prioritizing IT strategies are all part of some of the kickstarts that we offer. So, and really the IT strategy for mobile kickstart is really the one that best aligns to what we talked about, both in terms of trying to identify some of the use cases out of the business, prioritizing those, building a bit of an app roadmap, and then kind of pulling that into an IT strategy to understand where that spend should be. So like we said, we're also going to follow up this webinar with an email with a copy of the slides and a link to the recording from today. And we're always available for a free 1-hour advisory call to get a little bit more information around what you guys are doing, and if there's a way that we might be able to help with that. One more quick question. It's 1:59. Jim asks, can you speak to the success of transforming existing an IT organization versus creating a new innovation team for mobile?
Yeah, one reason I think you have to kind of bifurcate, the development aspect from some of the other elements like infrastructure and security and web services and so on. A lot of what you're going to do in mobile is going to consume those sorts of resources. There's no reason to create a separate mobile infrastructure team. There's no reason to create a separate mobile web security team. Those are all elements that I think, or a web services team, that your existing teams can continue to do and support your mobile objectives with. Now, when it comes to the development side of things, I think that's where sometimes you may have to look at building a new team, because the skills and language requirements that they'll be working with might be very different. Certainly the UX teams, UX for the desktop and UX for a mobile device are quite different and require a different kind of perspective. But someone who's working on a legacy system doing TPF is not going to be really helpful if you need them to code in Objective-C or Swift or even JavaScript for that matter. And some people will try and take, if they're going to use something like Accelerator, which uses JavaScript as their primary programming language, or maybe C# with Xamarin. If you have people with those skill sets, you might be able to transition some of them onto your mobile development teams. But you also have to understand how those different platforms work, and there's thousands of APIs that you have to kind of wrap your head around, which will be all new to those people. So I would suggest